My son vanished 3 months ago. Last week, I followed his browser history to a town that doesn't show up on most maps. I didn't think I'd ever be the kind of dad who breaks into his kid's laptop, digs an old rifle out of the back of the closet, and drives into the woods after dark to walk into an abandoned town. I also didn't think my son would vanish on a normal weeknight between our house and his friends. You learn weird things about yourself when everything you thought was solid drops out from under you. The missing kids were background noise at first. Posts people shared on Facebook. A screenshot of a news article someone dropped in the group chat. Photos of smiling teenagers with the same school picture blue background, followed by paragraphs asking if anyone had seen them. Some kid from 2 towns over never made it home from football practice. A girl was found wandering on the shoulder of Highway 6. Barefoot, clothes shredded, no memory of how she got there. The article said she kept asking if her real parents were still okay, and refused to look in mirrors. 2 hitchhikers stopped posting on Instagram somewhere along Route 17. Their last shot was a rusted gate next to a green mile marker sign that had been shot up so many times the numbers were hard to read. The caption was something stupid like, "If we die here, it's his fault." I'd see that stuff while waiting in the Food Lion checkout line or sitting on the toilet scrolling my phone. I'd feel that tight, mean little twist in my chest any parent gets, shake my head, and then go back to my own life. People here talked about it, of course. That's what small town people do when something big and bad happens close enough to taste. "It's a trafficking ring. Has to be. They take the pretty ones." Nah, cult stuff. You know they've always had weirdos up by the county line.
"Kids OD, wander off. Coyotes do the rest. Nobody wants to say it."
Everyone had a theory that made it not their problem. If it was drugs, then you just had to make sure your kid didn't do drugs. If it was hitchhiking, you just had to make sure your kid didn't stick out their thumb on the highway. Simple. I listened and nodded and checked the locks a little more often. But deep down, I believed the same thing. That it was something happening to other people's kids. People who weren't careful enough. People who let their kids run wild. My son Luke didn't fit in any of those categories. That's what I told myself. He was lanky, all elbows and knees, with hair that never quite decided which direction it wanted to lay. He lived in hoodies and graphic tees. He worked weekends and a couple evenings at the Food Lion, rang up old ladies' groceries, and complained about his manager on the drive home. He played games, watched streamers, rolled his eyes when I reminded him about taking the trash out. He wasn't sneaking out windows. He wasn't buying pills in parking lots. He was just normal. The night he disappeared, it was one of those damp evenings where the sky never fully commits to rain. It just hangs there and spits on everything. The stove clock said 6:34 p.m. I remember that because I was glaring at it, waiting on leftover mac and cheese to finish in the microwave, trying to decide if I was hungry or just bored. Luke walked in, already wearing his beat-up Vans. "I'm going to Dylan's," he said, opening the fridge and staring into it, like there was going to be some new food he hadn't seen the other 6 times he'd done that day. "We're going to cram for the calc test. I texted you." He had. There was going to Dylan's in a little bit, sitting between my "don't forget trash day" and his thumbs up emoji in our thread. "Take a jacket. It's gross out," I said, stabbing at the microwave button when it beeped. He made a face at me, turned, and grabbed my old army field coat off the hook by the front door instead of his flimsy zip-up. "This one's cooler," he said, shrugging it on. The sleeves almost covered his hands. It looked wrong on him. Too big, like he was trying on a costume. "That thing smells like a wet dog in a basement," I said. "You look like a raccoon that mugged a veteran." He snorted, that quick half laugh he did, and flipped me off in this lazy, half-hearted way he'd picked up lately. "Love you too. Just text me when you get there," I said, because that was the rule. Seriously, Luke? Yeah. He yanked the door open, hesitated for half a second like he was going to say something else, then just shook his head and left. The door shut. The house went back to the microwave hum and the kitchen clock ticking. My phone buzzed at 7:05 p.m. Made it. 2 words. No period. I remember the exact gray bubble because it's still pinned at the top. According to Dylan's parents, he never arrived. They told the police they'd been waiting on him, that when he didn't show up by 8, they assumed he bailed or got stuck doing something at home. Dylan sent him, "Where are you?" at 7:20, and, "Dude?" at 7:30. Those texts are still sitting there with delivered under them. Never read. By 9, I'd called Luke 5 times. Straight to voicemail. I told myself his phone had died, or he'd left it on silent somewhere. By 10, I was driving his route with my high beams on, pulling over every couple hundred yards to shine a flashlight into the ditch and tree line. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the light once and had to walk back 10 feet in the dark to find it. We called the police because, at some point, you either call or you sit there and go insane. They did what they're supposed to. A patrol car did a slow crawl along the road with its spotlight sweeping. Officers checked Dylan's place, the park, the convenience store parking lot where kids sometimes hang out. They took a missing persons report, which is one of those phrases that doesn't feel like it applies to you until it does. Detective Reynolds showed up the next day. Late 40s, softening around the middle, a tie that never quite sat straight. He had a notebook that already had lines of my life in it by the time he sat at our dining room table. "Any fights lately?" he asked. "Trouble with teachers? Girlfriends? Boyfriends? Anybody older he might be talking to online?" "No," I said. He's a good kid. He complains about homework, plays too many games, eats an entire jar of peanut butter in 3 days if I don't watch it. That's it." Reynolds nodded, like that was what everyone said. "We'll put out a notice. Check the hospitals, card activity, all that," he said. "Sometimes kids just need space. They take off for a few days. Has he ever mentioned wanting to get out? Start fresh somewhere?" "No," I said, sharper than I meant to. He hates driving anywhere longer than half an hour. He gets carsick. Reynolds made a note anyway. They pinged his phone. The last signal put him on a half-mile stretch of county road between our subdivision and Dillon Street. Then the line just stopped. We'd walked that road so many times, I could close my eyes and tell you exactly where every crack and pothole is. Neighbors, people from church, kids from his school, strangers who'd just seen the posts. Everyone came out that first weekend. They wore neon vests and carried dollar store flashlights and shouted his name into the trees like the woods were just being stubborn about giving him back. We found a torn grocery bag, 3 crushed beer cans, a dead raccoon. Someone found an iPhone in the ditch, but it was too smashed to be his. A state trooper took it anyway. By the 3rd day, the search parties were down to family and a handful of stubborn people who decided they were going to be the ones to find him. By the 7th, the casseroles on our front porch started slowing down. People still asked, but they didn't linger as long in the driveway. On day 10, Reynolds called and said, "I'm not saying this is what happened, but has Luke ever talked about being unhappy here? Like, wanting to leave?" I hung up on him the first time, called him back 5 minutes later and apologized. That night, after my sister fell asleep on the couch with the TV still on some cooking show, I went upstairs to Luke's room. His door was half open, the way he always left it when he was definitely not hiding anything. The air inside was stale. Old deodorant, sour laundry, the faint plasticky smell of electronics that had been left off for a while. His bed was a mess, blanket kicked to one side. There was a hoodie in a heap next to the laundry basket instead of in it. 2 textbooks lay open on his desk under his laptop, highlighter marks bleeding neon yellow across equations I didn't understand anymore. The laptop was closed. I stood there with my hand hovering over it, arguing with myself about privacy and trust and all that, for maybe 30 seconds. Then I opened it anyway and typed his password. Don't get smug. If you live with a teenager long enough, you're going to see them log in at least once. His desktop wallpaper was some red-black abstract thing. There were folders with names like school crap and music. That hurt in a weird way. It felt like walking into someone's brain and realizing you never really saw half of it. His socials were what you'd expect. Memes, homework complaints, clips from games, a couple of DM threads that were mostly, "You up?" and "Nah," and arguments about the best Souls boss. "No, I'm miserable, gonna run away" monologue. I almost shut it, thinking I'd invaded his space for nothing. Then, I opened his browser history. You learn a lot about someone when you see what they type into search bars at 2 a.m. There were YouTube videos, how to cheese boss whatever, Reddit, some math help sites, a cursed amount of DoorDash. Buried in that mess was a forum I'd never heard of. Old school looking thing, gray background, clunky layout, usernames like Gutter Rat 13 and Bone Hotel. The thread titles were local, stuff like "Weird lights over Miller's Field" and "Anyone else see the guy by the quarry with no shoes?" One title made my skin crawl before I even clicked it. Anyone else heard of the skinned man out by Cinder Hollow? The first post from Guttermouth read, "Back when my uncle was a kid, 70s, before they shut down the mines, there was this dude they used to tell stories about, out by a mining town called Cinder Hollow. They called him the Skinned Man. The story was that if you went up there at night, you'd see someone in the windows wearing your face. He collects skins, especially teenagers because they still fit right. Whole town's abandoned now except him and, his closet." People replied with the usual mix of bullshit and maybe not bullshit. One person, Gray Fox L, said their older brother and some kids went out there on a dare, and one came back with his arm sliced like deli meat and refused to talk about it. Just said there was something wrong with the walls. Then I saw his username. Luke, my son. He'd replied, "Cinder Hollow's real. Went past the gate last summer with Tanner. Didn't go all the way in, but close enough. Whole place smells like bad meat and wet wood. I thought it was a dead deer or something, until I saw something move in one of the doorways. Looked like a person, but skin was all shiny like raw hamburger. It waved at me. I read it 3 times. He had never said anything like that to me. No, 'Hey Dad, saw a fleshy nightmare man waving at me. How was your day?' A few posts down, he wrote again. He's real, or something is. We heard it talk. Sounded like flipping TV channels. Kept switching voices. At one point, it sounded like my dad yelling at me to come home. Then my mom. Then Mr. Collins. Then it sounded like me. I'm not going back. Still hear it at night sometimes." That line, "still hear it at night sometimes," hit harder than anything else. 6 months before he'd vanished, he typed that. We'd eaten dinner, watched dumb YouTube videos together, gotten into mini fights about dishes in that time. He never mentioned that he'd heard his own voice in some abandoned town miles away. Further down, a comment from him dated a couple weeks before he disappeared. "Screw it. I'm going back when I get a car. Pretty sure there's more there. Church, basements, whatever. Half of you are lying. I want to see it for myself. I'll drop pics. At the bottom of the thread was a link to a map site with a little red pin in the middle of nowhere. Cinder Hollow. Population 0. In another thread, someone had posted a grainy photo of a sagging main street, tall trees closing in. People argued about whether a pale blur in the background was a person or bad compression. One user had written, buried in a pile of jokes, "If you hear your own voice out there, don't follow it." Underneath, a reply from Luke, "Too late, LOL." I closed the laptop because my hands were shaking and I was starting to feel like I was going to throw up. If I brought this to Reynolds, I knew what would happen. He'd see, "Screw it, I'm going back," and call it evidence of intent. He'd see the map pin and say Luke had planned to leave, go camping, whatever. He'd latch onto that and it would become the story. Kid runs off chasing urban legend. End of thread. Nobody was going to drive 30-something miles to a condemned mining town on the say-so of a niche forum. My heart was beating so hard it made my vision pulse a little. I sat down on his bed. The mattress still held the shape of his weight in the middle. There was a faint smell of his shampoo on the pillowcase. At some point, the idea landed fully formed instead of half-formed. I wasn't showing this to anyone. I was going myself. Finding Cinder Hollow on a map is one thing. Driving there feels like choosing to walk off the end of the world. It was 37 miles, according to my phone. Route 17 up past the county line, then a right turn where there wasn't technically a road anymore. The next morning, I told my sister I needed to go for a drive. She watched me pour coffee into a travel mug and then grabbed my wrist when I reached for the fridge handle. "You're not going to do something stupid, are you?" she said. Define stupid. I tried to joke, and it came out brittle. I can't sit here all day refreshing the same stupid news articles. "Text me when you get where you're going," she said. "Seriously, I don't care if it's just I'm alive." "I will," I said. I meant it. In the garage, I pulled down the old plastic rifle case. I'd put it behind the Christmas decorations years ago, because it felt weird having it closer. The latches were a little stiff, but it opened fine. The AR-15 inside looked the same as the last time I took it to the range with the guys from work. Slightly scratched black finish, worn spot on the stock where I always rested it on the bench. I checked the bolt, the chamber, clean, oiled. I grabbed the ammo can from the shelf, counted out rounds, filling magazines at the dinner table, while my sister pretended she couldn't see exactly what I was doing from the sink. Rifle, 3 30-round mags, 90 rounds, flashlight with fresh batteries, pocket knife, phone fully charged, one of those beat-up Aldi granola bars that had been in the pantry too long. The whole thing felt like overkill and not enough at the same time. Route 17 is one of those roads that looks the same no matter how many miles you drive. Trees, old billboards for antique malls, the occasional gas station that should probably be condemned. The sky was that flat, low gray that makes everything look like it's been put under a dirty sheet. I watched the mile markers tick by. 38, 39, 40, 41. At 42, there was a rusted gate in the tree line, just like in the hitchhiker's photo. Someone had spray-painted a crooked smiley face on one of the posts years ago. Half of it had flaked off. The GPS dots on my phone lined up. I turned off the highway and bumped up the little gravel lip. The chain-link gate was secured with a padlock that had been cut clean through years ago. The gate screeched when I pushed it open. The sound went out into the trees and didn't echo back from anything human. The road beyond was a pair of ruts through dirt and weeds. My truck complained with each branch that scraped the sides. I turned the headlights off halfway down, letting the dim daylight do what it could. It felt less like sneaking and more like not wanting to announce myself. It smelled different in those woods. The air was colder, even though my dashboard said it was the same 43 degrees Fahrenheit. There was a heaviness to it, like a room where someone had been smoking for years and tried to cover it up with a cheap air freshener. The trees thinned suddenly, and there it was. Cinder Hollow sat in a shallow basin between low hills, like a toy town dropped in a cereal bowl. Main Street cracked and buckled, buildings leaning in toward it like they were trying to whisper to each other. There were maybe a dozen visible structures. Brick front shops to the right, wood-sided houses to the left, a taller shape at the far end that resolved into the church when I squinted. Windows were either boarded up, broken out, or hanging in jagged shards. Trees and vines had pushed through roofs and walls. What paint remained was sun-bleached and peeling. Off to the right, I could just make out the rusted shape of old gas pumps next to the sagging Phillips 66 sign, the orange circle faded to a pale ghost. Under all of that, under the wet leaf rot and the cold air, was the meat smell. Not a whiff, a presence. Thick, sweet, sour, like walking into the back of a butcher shop on a hot day if someone had unplugged the fridge for a week. It sat at the back of my throat and made my tongue feel coated. I parked at the edge of what had once been the town limit, next to a broken wooden sign that still read, "Welcome to Cinder Hollow," in faint red letters. Someone had spray painted a crude skull over the word welcome. I turned the engine off. The world went too quiet, too fast. No birds, no wind in the trees, nothing. You don't realize how much tiny background noise there is until it all stops at once. I got out, slung the rifle over my shoulder, clipped the flashlight to my belt, and walked into town. My footsteps sounded wrong. Each one echoed more than it should have, bouncing off the hollow windows and coming back with a delay like there was someone slightly out of step behind me. At first, I tried to chalk the feeling of being watched up to adrenaline. Anyone walking into an abandoned town looking for their missing kid and a thing called the skinned man is gonna feel watched. But adrenaline doesn't put a fingertip right at the base of your skull and press. That's what it felt like. A small, steady pressure where my hairline ends. The tiny hairs there stood up and stayed up. It didn't fade or move. It just stayed, like whatever was watching had picked one specific spot on me to focus on. I kept flicking my eyes up to the windows, expecting to see a shape move, a curtain twitch. Nothing, just holes and shadows. On my left, an old diner leaned into the street. Chrome edging rusted through, big front window mostly gone, the few pieces still in the frame smudged brown. Inside, I could see overturned stools, a counter with a few cracked mugs still on it, a faded, "Today's Special, Meatloaf," sign hanging crookedly. On my right, a one-story building with a barely readable pharmacy sign had its door half open. The interior was pure dark, shelves collapsed into themselves. The meat smell got stronger the further into town I went. It wasn't coming from one obvious source. It was just everywhere. In the porous concrete, in the wet wood, in the dirt. There was a dark stain in the middle of the intersection where Main Street met what might have been Oak Street once. It had soaked into the cracked asphalt and dried. It could have been oil, but the color was too brown, and the streaks were leading away from it. I didn't get closer. The church sat at the far end like a broken tooth. It was stone and old brick, taller than the other buildings, with the steeple half broken. The cross was gone from the top. A twisted piece of metal on the roof might have been it. Trees crowded close, roots likely squirming right under the foundation. Luke had mentioned a church and basements in one of his posts. Of course he had. I had just shifted my weight toward it when something moved ahead of me. At first, I thought it was a person. Right height, right general shape, stepping out between two buildings into the street. My brain slotted it into man in a coat, without really looking. Then my eyes adjusted, and my brain had to reboot. The man's skin was gone. Not burned off or torn off in patches. Completely gone. The thing walking into the street was red and slick from head to toe. Muscles wrapped around bones in bundles. Tendons flexing with every Frankenstein uncertain step. You could see individual fibers twist and release. Its head was like an anatomy model when you strip the face off. Eye sockets empty, just dark holes. The jaw hung crooked. The teeth were all there, which somehow made it worse. As it walked, its feet slapped the cracked asphalt, leaving damp smears. More followed. They came out of the alley in twos and threes, then more from a side street. Some walking on two legs, some crawling. One dragged the lower half of its body behind it, spine bowing with each pull. Another moved on all fours, but with its elbows bending the wrong way. There were, I don't know, 24, 3? It felt like a lot more. They weren't quiet. "Please," one gasped, voice shredded, like a man who'd been screaming for hours. "Help me! God, please! It hurts! I can't... Where are you? Where are you? I can't see! I can't... Mom? Mom! I'm lost! I'm lost!" The voices overlapped until I couldn't tell which flayed thing was saying what. Some of them had no mouths at all, and still somehow made sound. They didn't move with purpose. They shuffled, bumped into each other, drifted like a horrible, aimless parade. I pressed myself against the brick wall of the hardware store so hard my shoulders hurt. The rifle came up on pure muscle memory, but there wasn't anything obvious to shoot at that would have made a difference. One of them had scraps of clothing still clinging to it. Half a hoodie sleeve, the waistband of jeans. On one set of shoulders, a strip of dark green fabric hung, slick with whatever covered the rest of it. There was a faint, hand-shaped discoloration on the pocket area, where something had once spilled. My old field coat has a stain like that, from an oil change I screwed up in the driveway when Luke was 7. He'd helped by dropping the cap in the pan. For a second, I thought I was going to black out. One of the flayed things turned its head toward me. Its empty eye sockets pointed straight at where I was pressed to the wall. The muscles around its jaw worked. The mouth opened wider than it should have, the flesh there cracking. Nothing came out but a low, broken moan. I didn't breathe. I don't think my heart beat. After a moment, it turned back, joining the others as they drifted down the street, past the intersection, toward the houses. Their voices, the begging, the praying, the mindless babbling, layered and faded as they went. When the last of them vanished behind a caved-in porch, I realized my fingernails had dug into the mortar between the bricks. My palms hurt. I swallowed, forced my fingers to unclench, and did the stupidest sane thing I'd ever done. I kept walking toward the church. The church doors complained when I pushed them. The left one was warped and only opened halfway before it stuck. The right swung inward reluctantly. Dust billowed up, glittering in the flashlight beam when I finally turned it on. Pews sat in crooked rows, some split, some missing chunks. The center aisle had a path of clear floor where recent footprints had disturbed the dust. The meat smell here was almost physical, like you could lean against it. Stained glass windows on either side were mostly broken, the remaining shards hanging like jagged teeth. Colored glass pieces littered the floor, scuffed pale by shoes. I followed the footprints. They led to the left of the altar, where a section of the wood paneling didn't match the rest. Slightly different color. Newer, cheaper wood. Someone had slapped boards over something, without bothering to make it pretty. I set the rifle against the nearest pew, within reach, and put my shoulder into the paneling. The boards groaned and flexed, nails screaming in protest, but they came away one by one. Behind them was a plain wooden door with a greened brass handle. I put my ear to it. Nothing. Just the faint drip of water and my own breathing. The handle turned. Cold, damp air exhaled from the gap. It smelled like basements and mold and something underneath that made my tongue feel thick. The flashlight beam showed a narrow wooden staircase going down. The steps darkened with age and moisture. I thought about going back to the truck right then. About driving until my gas light came on. Calling Reynolds anonymously from a payphone that probably doesn't exist anymore. And telling him there was a hole in the world under an old church, and it was eating kids. Instead, I picked the rifle back up, slung it, and went down. The stairs creaked under my weight. I spread it out, walking on the edges like that would help. Moisture beaded the walls. When my hand brushed them for balance, it came away cold and gritty. The air got cooler as I descended. The smell of mold strengthened. Underneath it, that same meat stink, heavier, older. The stairs ended in hard-packed dirt. The flashlight beam pushed out into a low, wide room. Old stone walls, heavy beams along the ceiling, some cracked. The shape of the room made me think root cellar before I saw the well in the middle of it. It was waist-high, built of stone smoothed by hands. A rotting wooden cover shoved to one side. A rusted winch stood next to it, the rope still threaded over the spindle and hanging down into the dark. The dripping sound came from there. I walked up to it, the dirt feeling a little too soft under my boots, and aimed the flashlight down. The beam went a long way, then vanished into black. Somewhere far below, something moved. A faint ripple of reflected light that might have been the water or might have been my brain making things up. "Luke," I said. Saying his name down there felt wrong, like writing it on a grave. It echoed weirdly. The walls caught it and gave it back thinner. For a second, there was only the drip. Then... "Dad?" It floated up the shaft, thin and muted, like hearing someone shout through a bad phone connection. Every muscle in my body locked. "Luke?" I leaned over the stone ring, gripping it hard enough my knuckles hurt. "Luke? Where are you? Can you move?" "I'm down here," he said. It was definitely his voice. A little hoarser, strained. "I'm stuck. I can't feel my legs. It's cold. It's so cold. Please." My brain split into two tracks. One part screamed, "This is wrong. This is bait. Nobody sounds that clear from that far down a well. This is exactly the kind of bullshit that one forum user warned about." The other part heard my kid calling for help. That part won. "I'm here," I said. "Okay? I'm here. I'm gonna get you out. Just hold on, don't move. Where are you hurt? Everywhere, he said. He keeps pulling, putting things back wrong. He says he saved me for last. Dad, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. Something hit me from behind. There was no sound of footsteps, no warning, just sudden, crushing weight slamming me into the stone. My ribs met the ring of the well, and all the air shot out of me in one ugly, dry sound. The flashlight flew out of my hand, bounced across the floor, and rolled until it pointed at the far wall. I couldn't inhale. Whatever had me pinned didn't feel like hands. It was a blanket of pressure from my shoulders down to my lower back, heavy and cold and wet through my jacket. I could feel it seeping into the fabric, into the seams. Warm breath. Mine? Someone else's? Washed over my ear. Too late, Luke's voice whispered there. Not from the well. From right up against my head. That voice in the forum thread flashed through my mind. If you hear your own voice, don't follow it. Too late for that, too. Some half-buried part of me got angry. At him, at myself, at whatever had decided my family was toys. I clawed for the rifle. My left shoulder screamed. My fingers caught the sling, dragged it under me. I couldn't twist to aim. I could barely get the barrel pointed away from my own guts. I lined it up as best I could and squeezed the trigger. The cellar detonated with light and sound. The first flash showed the wall. The second showed something peeling itself off my back, unsticking from my jacket in a slick sheet, and skittering away like a spider made of laundry. The weight vanished. I collapsed sideways onto the dirt, coughing, vision going spotty at the edges. Dust and tiny stones rained from the ceiling. The flashlight flickered and went out. For a second, there was nothing but the ringing in my ears and the burn in my chest. Then the drip of water crept back in. I slapped the flashlight. Once, twice. It flickered, then came back on at half strength. I swung the beam around. Something was standing at the far wall. For a heartbeat, I thought it was the same thing that had just peeled off of me. Then the light caught its face, and the bottom fell out of my stomach. It was me. Same jacket, same jeans, same scuffed boots with that little crescent-shaped scratch on the left toe from when I dropped a socket wrench. Same cheap watch with a cracked face band. Same face I try not to look at too long in the mirror most mornings. Except the eyes. They had color, they had pupils, but they sat wrong. Too still, too flat, like doll eyes glued into place. And the smile? The smile pulled my own mouth into a shape I'd never seen on it. Too wide, too even. The skin around it looked stretched thin, like it was being pulled from behind. You know when you try to put a fitted sheet that's too small on a mattress, and the corners don't quite meet? It had that energy. It cocked its head to one side in a slow, jerky motion. "Don't," I said, without knowing what I was asking. "Don't," it repeated in my voice. Not the way I hear myself in my own head, the way it sounds on recordings. I heard my own weird nasal tone wrapped around that one word and wanted to crawl out of my body. I didn't think. I fired. The rifle jumped. The muzzle flash froze my stolen face in place for a split second. Bullets punched through the chest, shoulder, cheek. Fluid, too dark for blood, sprayed the wall. It didn't scream. It just glitched, like a video buffering. It took a half step back. Holes appeared in the jacket, in the body underneath, Then the skin slipped. It didn't fall off in normal patches. The whole outer layer, clothes, my face, the illusion of bone structure, slid forward like a costume being shrugged out of. Underneath was a mess. Not muscle and bone in the way you'd expect. Layers. Faces pushing out and sinking back in. Mouths wrenched sideways in what might have been a chest. Eyes embedded where no eyes should be, rolling independently. Hands pressed against the inside of it, stretching the surface like something trapped under plastic. You'd see 5 fingers splay out, then dissolve as more flesh flowed over them. "This one doesn't fit," a voice said from somewhere inside it. Not my voice, not Luke's. Something dry and crackling. "The seams are wrong," another voice answered from a different part of the mass. "He's been worn before." Then, layered over both, in my own voice, amused. "His son, though? That one was almost perfect. Barely had to adjust." I emptied the magazine into it. It didn't move like a thing being shot. It shuddered, sure, chunks blowing out here and there, but every hole I made just pulled closed again as more of it poured in. By the time I ran out of rounds, it wasn't there. Not dead, just not there, like someone had taken their hand off a projector. The only evidence it had been standing there was the spatter of that dark fluid on the far wall and a few patches on the floor. That's when the laughter started. My laughter. A short, stupid huff I'd heard in home videos and hated. It came from behind me first, too close, then from my left, then from somewhere above, warped by the low ceiling. I whipped the flashlight around and finally saw what I must have been refusing to see since I walked in. The walls weren't just stone. People were in them. They jutted out at odd angles, half swallowed. A man's shoulders and head fused to the wall, his arms vanishing at the elbow. A teenage girl from the waist up, her hands frozen mid-reach. An older woman with her torso turned sideways, one breast pressed flat against the stone like someone smeared her into it. Some had skin, some didn't. Some were missing chunks, the edges smooth like someone had cut out pieces for a pattern. All of them were alive. Their chests rose and fell in shallow, fast movements. Eyes darted, rolled, fixed on me. Mouths opened and closed silently, like fish. They weren't random. Once my brain stopped screaming and started noticing, I realized their bodies followed lines. Arms and torsos and legs aligned along invisible paths that curved around the room. They weren't decoration. They were stitches. The ceiling was worse. Thin, pale membrane stretched between some of the beams, sagging. Faces bulged in that film. Just the impressions of them. Eyes, noses, lips, pressed from the other side. One pair of brown eyes near the center. I knew instantly. "Luke," I said. Those eyes blinked. A face pushed through, tearing the membrane like wet paper. It was his. Raw around the edges, skin missing on half the cheek, but undeniably his. Same slight dip in the bridge of his nose, same uneven eyebrows. His mouth worked. "Dad?" he mouthed. It sounded like air pushed through jello when it finally came out. He... The skin around him rippled. Something behind it yanked him back, like a hand grabbing the collar of a shirt. He disappeared into the ceiling again. I think I lost a few seconds there. When I came back, my knees hurt, and I realized I'd sunk down without meaning to. I grabbed the nearest arm sticking out of the wall and tried to flex it, pull it free. My fingers sank in. The flesh was soft and wrong temperature. Not quite warm, not cold. Clear, jelly-like fluid leaked around my grip. The man attached to the arm screamed with his eyes. His mouth didn't move. The skin there was fused to the stone. The stone under my hand was softer than it looked. Warm. Not rock. Something pretending very hard. From somewhere up near the ceiling, my own voice said, "You're gonna ruin the stitching if you yank like that." I pointed the flashlight up, to the beams, to the faces pressed in the membrane. Dozens of eyes stared back. Some were milky, some clear, some too many. "Where are you?" I shouted. It felt useless, but it came out anyway. The laughter cut off. For a second, the only sound in the room was the drip of the well. Then, right behind my left ear, my voice whispered, "Everywhere." Something cold and slick trailed down the back of my neck, like a finger made of raw muscle. I spun and fired on instinct. The bullet shredded a section of the wall where a young woman's face stuck out. Her eyes went wide. Clear fluid sprayed. The stone around her flexed and healed over, pulling her back in, leaving a smear. "Relax," my voice said from closer to the well now, tone amused. "You're jumpy. You don't want to be jumpy. It's messy when you're jumpy." "I liked your boy," another voice said, this one sounding like someone had rubbed gravel into my vocal cords. "He came looking for me. Brought his best friend and everything. So proud of himself, like a little detective." "Brave, too," a third voice added from above my right shoulder. "Didn't stop screaming for a long time. Good lungs." "I saved his skin," my voice said, almost fondly. "You do that with the good ones. I use the cheap stuff for practice." Something peeled itself out of the far wall again. This time it built itself up as it stepped forward. Limbs extruded, feet formed, skin poured over it in waves. A face bubbled up from underneath and settled into place like a mask. Luke's face. Not the torn version from the ceiling, the one from his last school picture. Hair a little too long in the front, falling over one eye. That stupid, half-bored expression he always had when he was forced to smile for a camera. "Dad?" he said, and for a heartbeat, it sounded exactly like him. Then other voices bled in under it, until it sounded like a dozen people all saying the word through each other. I raised the rifle. "Get out," I said. "Get out of him! Get out of everyone!" The thing wearing my son's face rolled its eyes. "You keep saying him like there's a separate person in here somewhere," it said, his mouth moving in a way that didn't fit the words. "I'm hurt. I worked very hard on this one. You should be proud. He wanted to impress you." The walls trembled, bodies shuddered. A low moan rose from everywhere and nowhere. "I can give something back," it added, tipping its head. "Not the same, obviously. Once you've turned fabric into something else, you can't go all the way back. But I could let him talk to you properly. Let you hug him. For a little while. Doesn't that sound nice?" It took a step closer. The seams along its jaw twitched. Every part of me wanted to step forward and grab him and never let go. That's the worst part. Even with the walls and the ceiling and the voices, for one raw second, the dad part of my brain tried very hard to believe there was a deal here, that ended with both of us walking out. The rest of me knew better. I fired. The bullet took a chunk out of Luke's forehead. For a second, the face caved in like wet clay, then filled itself back in, a different eye blinking where his should have been. "See?" the thing said, exasperated now. "Jumpy." The floor under my boots rippled. Hands grabbed at my ankles. Not human ones. Some had too many fingers, some not enough. The dirt itself puckered and flexed around my soles. I ran. I didn't think about strategy or rescuing anyone or finishing what I'd started. All that went out the window. All I had left was the animal need not to be down here anymore. The stairs were narrower than I remembered, or maybe I just wasn't seeing straight. I slammed my shoulder into the wall, hit the overhead beam hard enough to see white for a second, nearly lost the rifle when something tangled in the sling. Voices chased me up, overlapping, laughing, calling my name in my son's voice, my sister's voice, Reynolds' voice. One of them just repeated over and over, "You fit, you fit, you fit," in a sing-song. I burst back into the church, slammed the door, and dragged the closest pew across it, then another, stacking wood until the entrance was blocked. The door shook once. Just once. Then, whatever was on the other side stopped pretending to need doors. It was quiet in the church, except for my heart trying to beat its way through my ribs and the creak of old wood. My phone said I'd been down there 19 minutes. It felt like I'd lost a year. Outside, the world was dim and flat. Full dark hadn't landed yet, but whatever light the sky had left was the wrong color. The town looked worse in that in-between light. Edges blurred, the buildings leaned a little more. Shadows in doorways looked thicker. I listened for the shuffle of the skinless crowd, but heard nothing. The meat smell still hung in the air, but fainter now, like stale smoke. I didn't walk. I didn't run either. I did that fast walk you do when you're trying not to look like you're running, but your body really wants you to. My truck waited at the edge of town like something from a life I'd stepped out of. I was maybe 20 feet away when I heard him. "Dad!" Not echoing from a well, not layered with other voices. Clear, open air. The way it sounded echoing up from the basement when he was younger and wanted to show me something. "Dad, wait!" My fingers tightened on the keys. I turned. He stood in the middle of the street by the "Welcome to Cinder Hollow" sign. The hood of my field coat was up. His hands were in the pockets. Jeans, Vans, one knee rip, mud on the toes. He was backlit by the dull sky and the dark shapes of the houses. I couldn't see his face clearly. "You left me," he said. His voice cracked on left. "You heard me and you left." Something in my chest twisted in a way I don't really have words for. It was like guilt had teeth. "Take your hood down," I said. He didn't move right away. The wind puffed his sleeves a little. "Dad, it's freezing," he said. "Can you just... I don't want to yell in the street. Please." "Take it down," I said. "Please, Luke. Just take it down." His hand came up, slow. Fingers pinched the edge of the hood. Then he smiled. I couldn't see his mouth directly, but I saw the way the fabric over his cheeks moved. Too wide. Too slow. "What difference would it make?" he asked. His voice changed halfway through the sentence. Started as his, ended as mine. Other notes threaded through it. Higher, lower, like other people were trying the words on along with him. I didn't shoot. I wish I could say I did something brave or definitive there. I didn't. I got into the truck, slammed the door, locked it, and turned the engine over with hands that felt like someone else's. He didn't rush me. He just stood there, head tilted, that not smile under the hood. As I pulled away, he lifted one hand and wiggled his fingers like he was waving. The trees swallowed the town fast. Branches scraped along the sides of the truck. Once, in the mirror, I saw something pale and too tall moving between the trunks, keeping pace. When I tried to look at it directly, it was gone. At one point, my phone buzzed with a no-service message, like it was mocking me. By the time I hit the main highway again, I had bitten the inside of my cheek so hard there was blood on my tongue. I pulled into my driveway at 8:49 p.m., according to the dashboard clock. My sister opened the front door before I'd even shut the engine off. She squinted at me through the porch light. "Did it help?" she asked. "The drive?" "Well," I said, "I know where he went." It was the closest to an answer I had. That was about 3 months ago. If you ask anyone official, Luke is still missing. There are posters with his school photo on the bulletin board in the Food Lion entryway, and a faded stack of flyers on the table by the door at the police station. Detective Reynolds calls once a week and says things like, "No new updates at this time," and "We haven't given up." He still doesn't know about the forum, or Cinder Hollow, or the well. Sometimes I think about telling him everything. I'll get as far as pulling my phone out, thumb hovering over his number. Then I'll picture the look on his face when I say, "There's a thing under the abandoned church that wears people like clothes, and I shot myself down there and it laughed," and I put the phone away. Even if he believed me, and he wouldn't because why would he? What's he gonna do? Send a couple of patrol cars and a backhoe? I'm pretty sure Cinder Hollow would eat them. So, I keep it. I go to work when I'm supposed to, or I pretend to anyway. I stand in the cereal aisle at Food Lion sometimes, and stare at the shelf where Luke used to stack the Cheerios, and my chest feels like it's full of sand. And at night, I lie in bed and wait for the house to go wrong. Because it does. That's the part that's hardest to explain without sounding like I've finally cracked. Most nights, somewhere between midnight and 3, the normal house sounds shut off. Not get quieter, not I stop noticing them. They stop. The fridge hum dies, the little clicks from the baseboard heaters go away. Even the neighbor's stupid lab, who barks at raccoons and car doors and his own reflection, goes quiet. The silence isn't empty. It's full. Like the space in a room right after someone says something they weren't supposed to. And that's when I hear him. "Dad?" It comes from the window. Always the same one. My bedroom. Second floor. Overlooks the backyard and the sad little fire pit we never finished building. The blinds are closed. The glass is old enough to rattle in storms. "Dad? Can you let me in? It's freezing." First time it happened, I honestly thought I was dreaming. I drifted in and out of sleep a bunch that night, jerking awake every time the cellar replayed in my head like a glitchy video. Then, that voice slid in. Same tone, same little upward inflection on "in." Everything inside me clenched. I didn't move. I stared at the ceiling and counted my breaths. something brushed the siding outside, right where my headboard sits against the wall. A slow, dragging sound. Not fingernails on wood, more like someone sliding their palm along it. It left my teeth feeling fuzzy. "Dad," he said again. "Come on, it's me. You changed the locks, remember? I can't get in." That stupid argument we'd been having about him forgetting his key the month before flashed in my head so vividly I could smell the spaghetti I'd been stirring. A nail tapped the glass. Light. Then again. Then again. Not hard enough to break anything. Just patient. I thought about getting up and yanking the blinds open so hard they broke off the bracket, just to prove to myself that there was nothing there. I lay there and did nothing. After a while, the tapping stopped. The drag along the wall shifted upward, like whatever it was had climbed. There was a slow scrape across the roof above the window, then nothing. Regular house noises came back like someone had turned the world back on. Fridge, pipes, the far-off hum of a car on the main road. The next morning, I checked the siding under the window. Nothing. No scratch marks, no mud, no footprints in the damp dirt by the foundation. It happened again the next night, and the next, and the one after that. Sometimes it's just the voice and the taps. Sometimes there's a heavier thump, like something throwing its weight against the wall by the headboard. One night, something dragged across the screen with a sound that made every filling in my teeth ache. It doesn't always sound like him now. Sometimes, it's my voice, which is somehow worse. "Hey," my own voice said 2 nights ago. Conversational, like I was calling from the hallway. "Open up. You forgot I was out here." I lay there with my teeth clenched so hard my jaw ached, and watched the thin strip of light at the bottom of the blinds. "I know you can hear me," it said, the tone like I'd use if I caught him lying about where he'd been. "I heard you just fine, remember? You taught me how to talk. That's on you." I haven't opened those blinds after dark since I came back from Cinder Hollow. People love to say that if something happened to their kid, they'd do anything. They'd go anywhere, open any door, no matter how weird, if there was even a tiny chance it was them on the other side. I used to say stuff like that too. It's easy when you're not standing there with your hand on a doorknob, knowing that something wearing your kid's voice has already tried to get you to lean into a well. These days, when the house goes quiet and the voice at the window shifts from Luke's to mine and back again, saying things like, "Come on, Dad, you should see how good he looks in you," I pull the covers up, stare at the ceiling, and don't move. Because I've seen the walls under that church. I've seen the seams. And every time I hear that patient little tap on the glass, I feel the exact place on the back of my neck where something cold and wet pressed down and said, in my voice, "Everywhere." Hey everybody, hope you enjoyed today's story. This one was the final installment of the Skinned Man series. I don't know if I would necessarily call it a series, more of a connected group of stories. This one and all of the Skinned Man stories are written by Justice Figueroa, also known as Pentyworth223 on Reddit. Justice Figueroa, the author of this one, super talented author. I really appreciate them letting me read this story and the whole series on the channel. I enjoyed this series, this group of stories. I really enjoy these types of stories where it's sort of an urban legend vibe, where somebody's trying to chase down some sort of creature or being that they don't really know if it exists or not. Another one on the channel, the Paper Mache Man, kind of gave me a little bit vibes of that. But yeah, I really enjoy these types of stories. Hopefully you guys do too. Let me know if you want to see more of these urban legend type stories on the channel. Just want to give a quick shout out to the author. Their website is currently up. It's called the Dark Archive HQ. So check that out, darkarchivehq.com. And Justice has all his books up there, as well as a bunch of other content. So check that out if you can. They also have a Patreon page, which I'll link down in the description below, as well as a few books out on Amazon, the Beneath the Wound series, and a few other books. So I'll link all of those in the description below, and hopefully you guys will check those out and support the author. Justice Figueroa and Marcus Lambert are also the ones who made the cover design for the Hollow's End book. If you haven't checked that out yet, I'll include a link to that as well in the description below for the Hollow's End book. Book 1 is available now, and I should have book 2 coming out sometime before the end of 2026. All right, that's about it for me today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the story, and I'll be back again on Friday with a new video. Hope you have a great day.